We're about to uncover a truth so strange, so counterintuitive, it may just change the way you see every hardship, every so-called failure, and every turning point in your life. Imagine this: you lose your job. Everything falls apart. Panic sets in. But 4 years later, you're running a business you never dreamed of, living in a city you never planned to visit, and waking up every day with a sense of purpose. What looked like a disaster wasn't just a blessing in disguise, it was the disguise of a greater force. That force is what we call the Nova effect.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The Nova effect comes from a story about a man whose luck seems to constantly change. His horse runs away. The neighbors cry, "How terrible." But then the horse returns with more wild horses. "How wonderful," they declare. Then his son breaks his leg taming one. Tragedy again. But when war comes and all the healthy sons are drafted, except his, he's spared. Every moment flips. Fortunes reverse. What seems bad becomes good. What seems good becomes bad. We think we know what's happening. But we don't. That's the Nova effect, the idea that we are radically incapable of seeing the full consequences of any event. So how do we use this idea, not just understand it, but live it? First, we have to rewire our reaction to life. Most of us are trained to label everything instantly. Good, bad, success, failure. But what if every label is a lie? What if your pain today is the raw material of your freedom 5 years from now? As Alan Watts said, the whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it's really impossible to tell whether anything that happens is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequences of the misfortune, or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune. Right now, there may be something in your life you're resisting. A breakup, a loss, a missed opportunity. But what if that's not the end of your story? What if it's the ignition point? Think about the word nova. In astronomy, a nova occurs when a star explodes in a sudden burst of brightness. It looks like destruction, but it's actually the birth of something luminous. The same is true in our lives. The breakdown is often the beginning of the breakthrough. The chaos is the chrysalis, but you can't see it when you're inside it, only when you step back. Here's where it gets psychological. Your brain is wired to avoid pain and seek comfort. It judges instantly, trying to protect you. But the same mechanism that keeps you safe also keeps you small. You break up, and your brain says, "We're alone. This is bad." You lose money, and your brain says, "We're unsafe." Panic. But what if you could train your brain to pause, to stop labeling, and instead lean into curiosity? Ask yourself, what if this is the best thing that's ever happened to me? Not as toxic positivity, not as denial, but as an act of radical openness. We're not saying everything happens for a reason. That's a cliche, and sometimes a dangerous one. But what if everything happens with potential? That's a different frame. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That's the Nova effect in action. The event doesn't have to be good, but your response can create something extraordinary. Suffering can become meaning. Chaos can become growth. But only if you step back and stop assuming you know what the event means. Let's go deeper. Think about the worst thing that ever happened to you. The most painful moment. Maybe it broke you. Maybe you're still angry about it. But what if you ask this, who did I become because of that? Not despite it, because of it. Did it sharpen your empathy? Did it burn away your illusions? Did it force you to grow? If so, was it really a failure, or was it a fire that forged you? Here's a practical exercise. Begin to treat every event in your life as a neutral data point. Something happens. You don't label it. You simply observe. Then you ask, how could this serve me? Not why is this happening to me? But what can I build with this? That shift in framing changes everything. Because now you're not a victim of chance, you're an alchemist of meaning. You're not just reacting to life, you're creating with it. Let's take a real-world example. Think of Steve Jobs, fired from the company he created, a public humiliation. But later he said, getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Why? Because it led him to create Next, which led to Pixar, which led to his return to Apple and revolutionized the world. That's the Nova effect. He couldn't have seen it in the moment, but it was unfolding. The explosion wasn't the end. It was the start of a brighter star. Now let's talk about trust. One of the hardest things in life is trusting the unknown. Not in a passive way, not sitting back and hoping, but in the most active way possible, leaning into uncertainty with a kind of holy curiosity, saying, I don't know what this means yet. I don't know what this will become. But I trust that if I stay awake, stay present, and keep creating, something beautiful will emerge. That's a warrior's trust. That's not weakness. That's strength. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain. You will. The Nova effect doesn't erase suffering. It transforms it through process, through time, through awareness. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote in Meditations, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's not just philosophy. That's a survival strategy. When you stop resisting the obstacle, you start using it. The rock in your path becomes the stone in your foundation. Let's return to you. Right now, what are you resisting? What story are you telling yourself about your life? This is unfair. This ruined me. I missed my chance. What if none of that is true? What if your story hasn't really begun yet? What if the chapter you're in, the messy, painful, confusing part, is the exact setup for your transformation? Every phoenix burns before it rises. Every forest must fall before it regenerates. So why should you be any different? Here's a final question for this part of the journey. What if the worst thing that ever happened to you is the very thing that will make you unstoppable? Not as a shallow idea, but as a lived truth. What if, 5 years from now, you look back and say, that was the day I started becoming me? Can you imagine that version of yourself? Can you feel them waiting on the other side of this pain? They're already real, already possible, already forming through the fire you're in. Let's take this deeper. You've begun to understand the Nova effect not as some abstract idea, but as a living force that reshapes your life from the inside out. It doesn't promise comfort. It promises expansion. And that expansion often comes disguised as collapse. So here's the next layer. If you want to truly use the Nova effect, you must become a master of reframing reality. Not denying it, not sugarcoating it, but seeing deeper, seeing beyond. The greatest breakthroughs in life often come from the greatest breakdowns in perception. What you thought was the end becomes a doorway. What you thought was failure becomes fertilizer. But you're not just waiting around for time to reveal the gift. You're actively shaping the meaning. That's what separates reactive people from transformational people. The reactive person says, "This shouldn't have happened." The transformational person says, "This happened. Now what can I make of it?" This is where philosophy meets power. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But how do you find your why when life falls apart? You don't find it. You create it. That's the secret. You don't wait for meaning to arrive, you forge it through fire, through questions, through relentless self-examination, through the decision not to let pain go to waste. You say, if I'm going to suffer, I'm going to grow. If I'm going to fall, I'm going to rise with something I didn't have before. Let's talk about control. Most of our anxiety comes from trying to control things we were never meant to. Outcomes, opinions, timing. But the Nova effect demands surrender not as weakness, but as the highest form of strength. You surrender to the mystery. You surrender to the unfolding. You stop demanding that life follow your plan, and you start collaborating with what is. This is terrifying at first, but eventually it becomes liberating. Because the truth is, you don't actually want control. You want meaning. You want growth. You want depth. And most of those things come through the unexpected, through the storm, through the detour. As Joseph Campbell put it, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So what if the thing you're afraid of right now, the thing you're avoiding, is the exact place you'll transform? Let's get practical. Here's a technique you can use whenever you're hit with unexpected pain, the 3 layers of reframing. First, identify the surface event. I lost my job. I was rejected. I failed. Second, ask, what is this teaching me about myself? Maybe it's showing you where you were out of alignment. Maybe it's revealing a deeper value. Third, ask, how can I use this to create a better future? This instantly shifts you from victim to creator, from passive to powerful. Now let's talk about emotional alchemy. Using the Nova effect isn't just about thoughts, it's about transforming emotion. Pain, fear, grief, these are powerful energies. But most people waste them by numbing out or spiraling. What if you did the opposite? What if you felt your pain so deeply, so fully, that it became fuel? Imagine taking your heartbreak and turning it into art. Taking your fear and turning it into courage. Taking your grief and turning it into compassion. That's not just healing. That's transmutation. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Nova effect is what happens when you wake up from that fate. When you start seeing every moment, especially the hard ones, not as destiny, but as raw material. Your unconscious patterns become visible. Your reactions become choices. Your wounds become wisdom, but only if you're willing to go deep. Let me ask you something. What's one moment in your life you've never forgiven? Something you still label as bad, no matter how long it's been. What if that moment is your greatest untapped power source? What if everything you've ever needed is buried under the meaning you gave that event? Are you willing to go back, not to relive it, but to reclaim it? To rewrite the story? You see, the Nova effect is not just about optimism. It's about ownership. It's about radical responsibility. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop blaming the past. You stop hoping life will fix itself. And you say, this is mine now. Every wound, every twist, every loss, I'm going to use it all. That's how you turn chaos into creation. That's how you become dangerous in the best way. Let's bring in another voice, Marcus Aurelius. He wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Think about that. The universe is change, constant, uncontrollable, unpredictable. But your life, that's shaped by what you think about that change. That's your domain. That's your kingdom. You can't stop the wave, but you can learn to surf. You can't control the storm, but you can become the storm. Let's go cinematic for a moment. Imagine a person. They lose everything: job, partner, health. They retreat into silence. Everyone thinks they're done. But in that silence, they begin to listen, to watch, to feel. They start writing, training, creating. They study philosophy. They confront their demons. And one day, they emerge not as who they were, but as a force. Focused, clear, unstoppable. That's the Nova effect when it's fully activated. That's the hero's journey in real time. And the question is, why not you? Why not now? Why not take everything that hurt, everything that broke, everything that confused you and use it to become the most powerful version of yourself? Not in spite of the pain, because of it. Here's a wild idea. What if your life is perfectly designed right now for your awakening? What if everything that's happening, yes, even that thing isn't random or cruel, but a sculptor's hand chiseling away everything that isn't truly you? Can you trust that long enough to stay open? Can you sit in the fire without trying to escape it? Pain is the price of transformation, but so is presence. You have to be here, right now, not in the story, not in the regret, not in the fantasy, but in this moment, this breath, this feeling, because this is where the Nova effect lives, not in some future outcome, but in your willingness to meet your life exactly as it is and still create something beautiful with it. There's a kind of person who can walk through hell and come out carrying water for others. They're not born. They're forged by fire, by loss, by surrender, and by the decision not once, but every day to turn pain into power. That person is you. Are you ready for the final part of this journey? The deepest layer of the Nova effect, the one that will change how you relate to time, identity, and destiny forever. Now we enter the deepest layer of the Nova effect. The level where time itself stops being your enemy and becomes your greatest ally. Where you no longer just endure life, you engage with it fully, fearlessly, and with a sacred sense of responsibility. Up to this point, we've explored how the Nova effect works through misfortune, how to reframe events, and how to use pain as fuel. But now we must go further. We must ask the most terrifying and liberating question of all. What if nothing in your life has ever gone wrong? Let that land. What if nothing, not a single moment, was a mistake? Not the heartbreak, not the betrayal, not the failure, not the lost years. What if it was all part of a pattern you couldn't see, a rhythm too complex to grasp in the moment, but perfectly orchestrated to bring you to this very point? The philosopher Alan Watts once described life as a musical composition, not a journey with a destination. He said, "We thought of life by analogy with a journey, but we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played." The Nova effect whispers the same truth. You weren't meant to control the music. You were meant to learn how to dance with it. And yet, most of us live like we're waiting for the real song to start. We say, "I'll be happy when, I'll feel worthy if," but what if the very moment you're in, even your confusion, your discomfort, your uncertainty is not the prelude to life, but life itself? What if this is the music, and your job isn't to decode it, but to respond to it with full presence? To use the Nova effect consciously, you must stop resisting the unknown and start partnering with it. This is not easy. Our minds are addicted to certainty. We crave control. We want life to be linear, predictable, safe. But the universe doesn't care about our plans. It cares about our growth. And growth rarely happens in straight lines. Here's the paradox. The more you try to force life to go your way, the more you suffer. But the moment you release your grip, life begins to reveal itself in ways far more intelligent than you could ever script. This is where faith comes in, not religious faith necessarily, but existential faith. Faith in the unfolding. Faith in the deeper order. Faith that even your detours are part of the map. As Rumi said, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. Let's talk about identity. One of the most powerful effects of the Nova principle is how it shatters your old definitions of self. You think you are your career, your relationships, your past. But the Nova effect strips all of that away. It throws you into chaos, and in that chaos, you're forced to ask, who am I really? Not who I was trained to be. Not who I perform as, but beneath all that, who am I? When everything falls apart, you meet the only part of yourself that doesn't. That unshakable center, that silent witness. And from that place, you begin to rebuild not a facade, but a foundation. You stop trying to be a version of yourself that fits the world, and you start becoming the version that transforms it. This is why some of the most powerful people on earth are the ones who've been through the most. They've died in some way, and they've been reborn not as who they were, but as who they were meant to be. They don't just survive, they radiate. They walk into a room and you feel their presence, or not because they're perfect, but because they're whole. The Nova burned away the false. What remained was truth. But here's the twist. You don't have to wait for disaster to awaken. You can choose it now. You can choose to reframe every challenge in your life, not just as something to get through, but as something to use. You can become an alchemist of experience. You can become someone who doesn't need comfort to feel powerful, just awareness. Try this. Look at your current life situation. All of it. The good, the hard, the confusing. Now close your eyes and say, this is not happening to me. This is happening for me. Say it again. Say it until it lands. Until something in you softens. That's the beginning. That's the moment the Nova starts working through you instead of just around you. Let's bring in another quote, this time from Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. He said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." What if your friction is your polishing? What if your trials are your transformation? What if every no you've heard, every door that closed, every person who left was exactly what needed to happen for you to become who you are becoming? There's a reason this video found you now, not last year, not next year, but now. Maybe it's because you're standing at the edge of something, a decision, a breakdown, a breakthrough. Maybe you've been asking, why is this happening? But the real question is, what will I do with it? That's the Nova effect. It doesn't give you answers. It gives you power. And power doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like surrender, like stillness, like choosing not to react, not to panic, not to collapse, but to pause, to breathe, to wait. And in that space, something shifts. The meaning begins to change. The path starts to appear, not always quickly, but clearly. I want you to imagine your future self right now, the version of you who has made peace with their past, who has turned pain into vision, who has stopped chasing and started creating. That version is not far away. They are already within you, waiting, watching, calling. And the only thing separating you from them is your willingness to say, I trust the process. So here's the ultimate practice. Every time something unexpected happens, good or bad, you pause. You breathe. You say, I don't know what this means yet. That's it. That's the mantra of the Nova effect. I don't know what this means yet. That word yet is everything. It creates space. It opens the door. It invites life to surprise you. Because that's the final truth. Life wants to surprise you. It wants to grow you in ways you can't imagine. It wants to show you that what looks like collapse is often the beginning of flight. That's not just a poetic idea. That's reality, if you're awake enough to see it. The star doesn't fear the explosion, because it knows that in breaking, it becomes brighter. So now, the choice is yours. You can keep labeling your life, or you can start listening to it. You can keep resisting the chaos, or you can start creating with it. You can keep waiting for the perfect moment, or you can realize this is the moment. The Nova effect is not something that happens to other people. It's happening to you, right now. In the areas of your life that feel most uncertain, most painful, most confusing. And you get to decide, will I be a victim of this moment, or will I be the artist of it? You already have the tools. You already have the wisdom. And if you've made it this far in the video, you already have the courage. So don't wait for life to hand you meaning. Make it. Don't wait for clarity. Create it. Don't wait for power. Embody it. You are the Nova. You are the explosion. You are the light that comes after. And your transformation isn't coming. It's already begun. Now go live like it.